Ethiopian and Eritrean forces have looted property, destroyed food crops, and slaughtered livestock in Tigray. The Ethiopian government has also discontinued all basic services into the region, including its annual budget, putting millions in danger. As UN says, over 5 million are in urgent need of humanitarian assistance, and close to 500,000 are living in famine-like conditions. Our reporters visited Saharti district to observe the horrific impacts. For more, Haile Gabriel reports.
Mamba is a particular vicinity found in Saharti district in southeastern part of Tigray, where residents told us that for months, Ethiopian and Eritrean soldiers had been slaughtering their livestock, stealing their stored food crops, and committed extrajudicial killings on civilians. Now, the invaders are long gone, but the ghosts of their past still lives in a way survival has gotten close to impossible.
The destruction they caused over our properties is unspeakable. They took everything we had: flour, chicken, and goats. They looted them all after we went into hiding in our absence. Besides, a total of 21 civilians had been killed by the Ethiopian forces alone. We went into hiding so many times with my 7-year-old son, and we couldn't find food everywhere we went. He couldn't get the nutrition he needed to survive. Having been sick for some time, he died of hunger and disease that came along.
When we came back home from hiding 10 days later, there was nothing left in the house. They took all our clothes, donkeys, goats, and everything we owned. They also took over our homes for weeks and fed on all the food we toiled and stored. We even found the duff we left mixed up with dirt by the enemy.
It's been 7 months since Abiy Ahmed's government and its allies started punishing the people of Tigray by imposing siege. Ever since, civilians including children and mothers are dying every day. So many residents of the Bamba vicinity are now at the brink of death due to lack of food supplies. Apparently, the victims in Saharti district, Bamba vicinity, calls out on all the humanitarian organizations to reach out for them as soon as possible.
Members of the Ethiopian forces have raped a woman here. The situation was so daunting that she was stressed out deeply. To make things worse, 2 of her children also get eaten by hyena while they were attempting to flee from savagery of the Ethiopian forces, leaving their home behind. I used to live someplace else in my own house. However, now, having seen my husband being killed by the Ethiopian forces in his own home, I have never tried to go back there. There were 4 houses in that village where all our husbands were killed. Now we all are sheltered widows.
This is the only thing I have to wear, and someone gave it to me. We have no shoes. All our belongings, including our son's mobile phones, jewelries, and radio, have been destroyed and looted. Our donkeys were taken away too. We managed to save our lives by hiding here and there. However, to have to be the ones to witness our brothers and sisters being slaughtered like animals is the most gruesome thing to see.
The administrator for the vicinity of Bamba in Saharti district, Mr. Tesfai Hagos, said that the existing situation is intensifying for the reason that farmers have missed the harvest season of the past year. Mr. Tesfai also added that so many mothers and children are being starved today in Tigray.
The harvest season is normally finalized before May. However, enemy forces were here till the end of May, and plowing was unthinkable. People were running away to save their lives.
On top of the damage caused by the occupation of the Ethiopian and Eritrean forces in Saharti last year, the 7-month-long siege has further damaged the people, with the discontinuation of all essential public services like communication, banking service, roadblocks, as well as entrance of all forms of commercial goods into Tigray. It has resulted in catastrophe for millions in Tigray.
December 11, 2020 marks 1 year since a brutal massacre unfolded in Oromare, a small town located in the central zone of Tigray, just over 15 kilometers from the ancient city of Aksum. We spoke with residents of a small town that they say they have witnessed unspeakable horrors. Again, Haile Gabriel reports.
December 11, 2020 was one of the darkest days that the town of Oromare would have to see. Eritrean soldiers would brutally massacre 1,000 civilians in this small town located in central zone of Tigray at the end of November last year. Earlier 2021, the United Nations announced that it would be undertaking an investigation of all atrocities committed in Tigray, jointly with the Ethiopian Human Rights Commission and a government-appointed party run by Daniel Bekele, a man who has been serving the interests of the government of Ethiopia. The results still remains doubtful as the investigation failed to examine the junctures where most massacres are believed to have taken place, Wogromarai being one among many. Families of the victims and eyewitnesses have talked to us about the untold tragedies committed by the Eritrean forces in December of the 11th, 2020.
مورحتم قبر هيوت جمال بشر تثيرس قرماي طعم عبد الجديد عمر بشر عطا ز توهلو كاب كتما وقرما رايك امصيو نابزاب زي ازنيتو امصيو زي قتلوه
مبراهتم قبر هيوت جمال بشر تيودروس قرماي طعم عبد الجديد and Omar Bashir have all been savagely massacred by the Eritrean soldiers here.
مو دق سبات مو بأسرهم ومو كم نوركوا بحمد كيخون ما عندنا قلنا صيد كامبل.
The crime committed against those civilians is one that would be remembered as the most heinous. Not only were they killed in a horrific way, but they were also crushed with big rocks over their bodies. This is inhuman. This is no matter a human would wish even on a beast that comes to feed on your flesh. We found many of the bodies of the dead rotten everywhere. Some of the bodies were partially eaten up by scavengers. This big stone was up there before they brought it and laid it over the bodies here.
Their hands were tied up with ropes before they were tragically killed by the fascist forces. The way they killed Tedros Girmay was peculiarly horrible. We found the others tied up with their hands behind their backs. It's indeed heartbreaking. They were finally thrown away here and we found their bodies after a week. Tu'um Abdul Jadid was here with the rest of them. All of their legs were tied up with ropes in one hole. We found them after taking out all these big stones out of the hole.
Following the devastating massacre of their beloved ones by the barbaric Eritrean forces in December 11, 2020, families of the victims speaks of the untold tragedy of Wogromarai massacre, horror-striking.
The day was Friday, December 11, 2020. We were having coffee at the moment. Then Eritrean soldiers came and took my son away from me. I haven't still met my son to this day.
I'm living in a deep, cutting sorrow along with my beloved children. Such a horrific incident has happened to us. My children are going through an excruciating experience following their father's death.
In early December 2021, United Nations Human Rights Council set up an international investigative team to look through the severe human rights violations and abuses in Tigray. The residents of the town of Wogromarai had hoped that these investigations would bring to light what actually unfolded in December 11 and bring the perpetrators to justice.
Earlier this week, a document allegedly belonging to the Ethiopian government on security concerns in Ethiopia listed Fano as a security risks, stating the privatization of arms and presence of irregular armed groups as a major concern. The document had become so controversial the Ethiopian government had to come forward and renounce claims that the irregular armed group may be forced to disarm, and called the armed group a sign of pride for the Amhara people. In a related statement from the head of Bureau of Communications for the region, Gzacho Mulna said that government will not disarm, but rather organize the group, calling the group a savior of the people of Amhara and a significant element in the fight against Tigray's armed forces. Now, the Fano Vigilante group is an irregular armed group that had first become infamous in 2018 when it displaced over 40 Tigrayans from Gondar. While the group is yet to be properly organized or trained, it has taken part in active combat against Ethiopian and Eritrean forces, and has even played a leading role in the ethnic cleansing campaign in Western Tigray, committing horrific atrocities, arresting, torturing hundreds of thousands of Tigrayans across the state. And our reporter, Fanio Lemuru, asks who are that Fano and what has been their role in the war on Tigray. Let's take a look at this report.
While genocides are typically state-driven, multiple actors not directly accountable to officials or government institutions participate in its implementation. A good example of this phenomenon is the Janjaweed in the genocide in Darfur and Interahamwe in the Rwanda genocide. In Ethiopia's case, the Fano Vigilante Group, a paramilitary group composed of ill-equipped individuals acting as a military force, have committed violent and brutal crimes throughout the genocide in Tigray. The Vigilante Group became infamous in 2018 when the group was responsible for the forced displacement of over 40,000 Tigrayans from Gondar, a historical city in the Amhara region.
I came here without any of my belongings. I only got this scarf to wear. They were locking us inside our house. We couldn't bring any of our possessions as they were urging and beating us to leave. They first killed my daughter on 29 November 2018. Then they looted my property and forced me to leave my home.
The group's genocidal intents have been on display from the very start, with members of the paramilitary group clearly stating their intentions to make the people of Tigray extinct.
ምናልባት የትግራይ ህዝብ ብዛቱ 6 ሚሊዮን ነው የአማራ ህዝብ ብዛት ደግሞ ወደ 30 ሚሊዮን የሚጠጋ ነው ምናልባት እንኳን 6 ሚሊዮን ህዝብ ለትግራይ ብቻ ብንመድብ ሌላው ህዝብ ነፃ ሊወጣ ይችላል
According to reports from that time, the group would not only displace Tigrayans but tens of thousands of Kamant and Agao, ethnic groups that call the Amhara region home. But the group's most horrific crimes would take place in western Tigray, where Fano would commit multiple massacres, acts of sexual violence in an effort to cleanse the Tigrayan identity, and displace over 1.2 million Tigrayans in an ethnic cleansing campaign that has continued till this day.
From the binds still biting into his skin, it's clear this man suffered a tortured death. This Tigrayan has been helping to recover the dead. He holds up the body, but the image is too gruesome to show you. His eyes, though, betray the horror in front of him.
Months into the conflict, a video would surface on Amhara media where leaders of the paramilitary group proudly admit their role in the invasion, occupation, and ethnic cleansing campaign in western Tigray, saying they made the area smell of Amhara.
ተከዜንም በማስረጃ ለማይጠምሪ አስተዳዳሪ ድልድዩ ላይ ባንዲራ ተክለን አስረክበን በቪዲዮ የተገደፈ ለማይጠምሪ አስተዳዳሪ ተከዜን አስረክበናል የአካባቢው ማህበረሰብ የአማራ መታወቂያ እንዲያወጣ አድርገን መታወቂያውን አውጥቶ አማራ እንዲሸት አድርገን ነው የመጣነው
Tsagazab Kasa, a military historian, points out the groups such as Fano have been present in almost all genocidal violence committed throughout history.
In the Second World War, before the ascendance to power of Nazi Party, there are different fascistic groups, paramilitary groups. The Nazi Party was formed by different paramilitary groups, and one of them was the Virile Society, and there were like the SS, what you call later the Gestapo. Of course, they later evolved into regular and highly advanced military units, but they originally came from paramilitary groups like what we are referring in our case. So these groups are behind atrocious acts in different. These groups are behind genocidal wars. These groups are behind the stories of Holocaust that we experienced, that the world experienced during the Second World War. These groups are the ones who are protagonists in Rwanda, like Interahamwe. These groups are just groups that operated in Burma, the former Burma, now Myanmar, and the groups like in Janjaweed in Darfur.
Tsagazab also explains that groups such as Fano are created and maintained through a cult of hate.
So Fano is purely a paramilitary group, a Tagish group, which is motivated by a hate cult and it's fully charged, highly charged with hate and driven to avenge non-Amharas and particularly the Tigray people, and to take away lands from Tigray and other regions that are adjoining the Amhara region. So with these motives, this group is now operating in, both in Amhara region and outside the Amhara region, just to fulfill these objectives that I pointed out earlier.
The historian also highlighted that political groups, investors, and other individuals are funding the Fano and romanticizing the acts of violence to ensure the groups not only continues to commit violence, but can do with absolute impunity.
Out of this interest to avenge, to take territories, and to settle past scores that the Fano sprang up, and those groups who are funding the Fano come out of this interest. Investors and political groups who are operating this, be it in the opposition camp or from the incumbent side, and different political groups and activists from different parts of Ethiopia who claim that they are advocating the cause of the Amhara, as well as those who are residing in the diaspora. So all these groups gave both political support, financial funding, and active engagement in covering up even the criminal acts of the Fano. And they are pushing the Fano even to take maximum measures, and even they are romanticizing the actions of the Fano.
Even though the Fano paramilitary group claims that it fights for the Amhara people, this group have been attacking and torturing even the Amhara since its emergence. That being said, we can say that this group has turned out to be a Frankenstein monster, to be using the historian's word.
Well, they claim they are accountable to the people of Amhara, but they are the ones who are looting the people of Amhara. They are like Frankenstein monsters, you know? Even this kind of unruly groups are capable of devouring their own creator. When the Fano was burning the residences of Tigrayans in Gondar, equally it was also burning the residents of the Amhara residents of that city, the command residents of that city. Even it was also killing some of the officials who first backed it. And now, in much parts of Wollo, let's say Kombolcha, were just looted by the Fano. Gondar city is terrorized by the Fano. They are just taking hostage and asking people for ransom, a huge sum of money.
Although the Fano vigilante group claims to be a savior to the people of Amhara, its acts clearly show that the intentions of this group is to wipe out Tigrayans and leave an unforgettable scar between the people of Amhara and other nations and nationalities of Ethiopia.
January 14th marks 3 years since the launch of Tigray Media House, a privately owned media company that had served as the only voice representing a Tigrayan voice during the 8 months long occupation of much of Tigray by Ethiopian and Eritrean forces. Our reporter Winta Kidane looks at the incredible contribution of TMH in informing and organizing the resistance against occupying forces in Tigray. Winta Kidane has this report.
The war waged on Tigray has been as much about narratives as it has been about destruction. The war has been marked by massacres, man-made famine, the use of sexual violence as a weapon of war, but equally destructive has been the complete communications blackout on the region that had lasted as long as the conflict. While the statewide communications blackout on the region was initially denied by Ethiopian authorities that claimed it had in fact been the Tigrayan government that has severed Tigray from the world, they have since admitted and have in fact started to defend their decision to do so. But while under complete darkness, Tigray's story was able to come out through the tireless efforts of people across the world that never tired to bring together small pieces of evidence and track a story down.
ኣዋሽ ዝባል ኣዋሽ ሰፈር ዝባል ኣብቲ ናይ መከላከያ መቐለ ዘሎ 17 ቀበሌ ከባቢ ዲያስፖራ ሰፈር ብተደጋጋሚ ሰብ ይቕተል ኣሎ ተባሂሉ ትማሊ ንድግስ ዶ ንተስካር ዶ ንገለ ኢሉ እቲ ምክንያት ብዘየግድስ ሓደ ብዕራይ ገዚኡ ክኸይድ ጎይዎ ካብ ኢዶም ሊጥዎ ናብቲ ናይ መከላከያ ዘለዎ ሰፈር ኣዋሽ ዝባል ናብኡ ታላ ሓመድያ ብዕራይ ናብኡ ጎያ ምስ ከደቶ ደድሕሪያ ከርክባ ኢሉ ምስ ከደ ብሽዱሽተ ጥይት ቀጥቂጦምዎ ቀቲሎምዎ ኣለዉ ሓደ መንእሰይ ኣብኡ
ነቶም ኣብ ህዝባዊ ወያነ ሓርነት ትግራይ ዘለዎም ወይ ድማ ተቃለስቲ ትግራይ ዘለዎም ኣስታት 1 ሚልዮን ዝኾኑ ተጋሩ ኣለዉ እሳቶም ከዓ ክጠሚው ብምግባር ነቲ ዝግበር ዘሎ ቃልሲ ወይ ከዓ ናይ ጉሬላ ዎር ዝበሎ ወይ ድማ ዲብያዊ ውግእ ኢዶም ንኽህቡ ንምግባር እዩ
Tigray Media House would play an irreplaceable role in bringing to light massacres, cases of sexual violence, and the systematic attack on the livelihood of Tigrayans. TMH, for instance, played a significant role in bringing to light the video of the Mahabara Degu massacre that was shared by the Media House. The Media House also played an important role in empowering and organizing Tigrayans at a time when lack of access to information may have made it impossible to organize, mobilizing communities to protest and demonstrate in and outside of Tigray, drawing international attention to the crisis in Tigray. Tigray Media House has played a historic role in mobilizing the resistance against the occupation of Ethiopian and Eritrean forces and creating ties with Oromo and Eritrean political leaders, organizing support across the board for the Tigray's cause.
Meanwhile, our reporters also spoke with residents of Maqala to ask what TMH means to them and what they believe has been the contribution of the Media House. So let's take a look at the report of Sulami Takhlai.
The TMH was the only media that we had during that darkest hour. So they played a critical role in order to vent our anger, just to tell our pains to the world, just to give timely information that was available in those dark moments in the region. So they were disseminating it to the world and they were giving us what the world was saying to us and what was happening outside Tigray during that time. We were getting it through the TMH and they were also venting our voices. So they played a critical role when we had no media that speaks about our pains, our sufferings. We were under assault from many forces, and it was a genocidal war, and it was fought in the dark. It was fought under total media and power and communication blackout. So during that time, there was one bright spot that was just telling the world what was going on in Tigray and what happened to the people of Tigray. So TMH had that power during that time, and it was a critical voice of the people of Tigray during a critical time. Well, so we don't forget that, and now we recognize their contributions, and I want to say to the TMH, keep it up and be also the voice of your people under this time. At this time, they have better opportunities, better access and better equipment than the medias that we had here, that we have in Tigray. So they can also boost and enhance the role that they have been playing in that critical time.
ናይ TMH ማለት ብጣዕሚ ኣብዚ 8 ወርሕ ሙሉእ ሚድያ ዘይብሉ
In the 8 months of darkness, when there was no other media, TMH brought light. We would watch TMH when it was the darkest. I don't even have the words to describe what TMH means to me. It's not only exposed what was happening in Tigray, but also connected us to the world. TMH was our only hope. We are so grateful to them, and I'm happy to see them celebrate their 3rd anniversary.
I'd like to congratulate them all on their 3rd anniversary. TMH was light during our darkest times. It was the only media that could provide us with relevant information. This is why we call it our light.
TMH played an important part in ensuring the existence of the people of Tigray during our darkest period. Stalin, Haile Mikhail, Agazi, and Alula fought for the very existence of the people of Tigray. Everyone would just wait to see them on air. Even when there was a power blackout, we would all go to places with generator just we could see TMH.
TMH بقالات راح تقلت زسرحوا زنور وسرح بملو بقالات راح تقلت هنا.
Words are not enough to express what TMH has done for us. They played an important role in exposing what was unfolding in Tigray. We're so grateful